Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Deal. I'm your host, Jason Kelly, here with Alex Rodriguez. Alex, really good to see you. Oh, my God. I'm so excited for this.
We spoke yesterday and we said we had to jump on because it's such exciting news. And it's really the news of sports and business.
All right. This is, of course, the record-breaking deal. Juan Soto signing for the Mets. Unbelievable 15-year deal. We're going to unpack it all. I mean, what's funny is this is a discussion tailor-made for our show. We're right in the middle of sort of our regular season. We're actually taking a break for the holidays. We've had some amazing episodes come out already. Sue Bird, Billie Jean King, George Pine, so much fun with those. We've got more coming out after the first of the year. Carolyn Blodgett, Josh Richards. So lots of stuff we have waiting for you. But as you said, there was no question we had to do this. I sent you a text as soon as this news about Juan Soto's record-breaking contract hit, because there was literally one human that I wanted to hear his reaction, and it was you. And then luckily we figured out a way to get this onto the podcast. So let me start there. The news hits the tape. We knew he was negotiating. We knew who he was negotiating with, but the number, the news, the team, what's your first reaction when you hear that?
I mean, my first reaction, Jason, is deja vu. I mean, I was in the exact same situation in an undisclosed location for 10 days. And what was interesting, Scott Boras was also my agent. Well, it was also the same thing, similarities, eerie. It was also the Hilton in Dallas. So my phone started blowing up, Jason. I thought I was like back in the future.
Yeah.
And I thought I signed the deal, but unfortunately it wasn't me, it was Juan Soto. I could not be more excited for Juan. I could not be more excited for Steve Cohen and Alex Cohen and the New York Mets. This is like a historic moment in sports in New York history.
So why? Tell me why. Because, I mean, it certainly feels like that. And I can't tell you how it's dominating every conversation. I'm here at the Hope Global Forum where you and I were last year here in Atlanta. There were several major league commissioners here, including Rob Manfred. I'm talking later with our friend Tony Ressler about some of the work he's doing here in Atlanta and beyond. But everybody's talking about this deal. What is it, other than the numbers, that really capture this sort of business imagination here?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a statement, especially in New York, around baseball, around the globe. I mean, this news hit everywhere. And if you think about it and you take a step back, the Yankees have been around for over 100 years. They've never, and I mean never with all caps, have lost a player they've coveted to another team. Why? Because forever, they've been the king of the jungle. They've had more resources, sometimes 2X, 3X, 4X than some of the smaller market teams. So whatever they want, they get. This is the first time somebody has stood up to the New York Yankees and said, not so fast. We're richer and we want to be better. And this is our city. And Steve Cohen and Alex Cohen, they're on their way.
It is remarkable. I mean, the New York of it all is just fascinating. And you bring up something that is at the heart of this, which is Steve Cohen is a different sort of owner. That's undeniable. And the moves that he's made, they have been bold. They have been aggressive, and you're right. It is a statement like no other. So let's talk about the Yankees for a second, and then I want to get back in the time machine. Did you feel bad for the Yankees in all of this when you saw that he was going to the Mets, or were you mad, disappointed? I feel like we're like two parents talking. It's like, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. Like, how did you feel as a Yankee and about your Yankee family?
Yeah, as a Yankee fan and a Yankee alum, look, it's been a long time since we won a World Series. It's been 15 years. And there's no question that the main reason why the Yankees made it to the World Series was the combination of Juan Soto and Aaron Judge. One lefty, one righty, both hit over 40 home runs, both extraordinary hitters. And of course, you have, Garrett Cole and others. But the main formula was the 1-2 punch that reminded me of Maris and Mantle back in the day. So the question for the Yankees is, how do they pivot out of this? And they're going to have a lot of resources to go out and deploy. But the last time they lost Robinson Cano, the pivot did not go well. And they signed some players that didn't work out, and they were back to square one. So all the pressure right now will be on Brian Cashman because he has a bank open. And the question is, what players would he attract to New York?
All right, so I'm taking you back in the time machine. 24 years, same agent, same hotel, same undisclosed location, as you say. What were you feeling in that moment? Because I feel like, again, you're literally the only other person who's had this almost eerily similar experience. What was it like in that moment for you?
Excitement and anxiety. I'm not sure which one I had both. I was stuck in this location for 10 days, but I was 24, Jason. And one of the great benefits of, entering the major leagues at 18 is it takes you to 6 years to become a free agent. Now, remember, Scott Boras had me 3 years prior to that. He had me at 15 years old. So for 9 years, from 15 to 24, he was training me almost like a robot, feeding me, giving me the information, preparing me for this big heavyweight battle. And when that battle came, just like Juan Soto, we were ready, he was ready, and I was ready. I knew he was ready 20 minutes after the last out when they got eliminated, that Juan Soto had his hat backwards. He did a post-game press conference. I'm not sure if you saw it. And he basically said, everybody starts at ground zero. Nobody has an advantage. And that's when I said, the Yankees are in trouble.
All right, so I don't want to get too far away from your own experience because I want to understand this because I've never been in those rooms. Like, what are the conversations like between you and Scott? Are you talking 10 times a day? Is he talking to you only when he has information? Like, especially during that first big deal, like, take us inside the room.
Yeah, in 2000 and 2001, it was a lot easier to hide because there was no social media, there was no Instagram, no Twitter, no X, all that. So I was in this location, and we were probably talking about 7 or 8 times a day. And the conversations consisted of, we're talking to these 5 teams, I'm talking to this owner at this time, I'm talking to this GM at this time. We want to start everybody at 200. That's the starting bid. And he said, we have 3 of the 5 teams there. Let me work on the other teams. I'll come back to you. But because I was getting ready for 9 years, Jason, the volatility of this, I was actually much more in the zone than I would have been if I hadn't been prepared. So Scott's formula is he wants to prepare you for the situation because when he knows it's go time, as a young man, you have to be emotionally ready for anything to happen. And it was so much anxiety because I could have ended up in Baltimore or the White Sox or the Mets. I had no idea where I was going. So, I also have, Cynthia was my wife at the time, and we were like, we have a young baby. We had no idea where we were going to go.
And I did wonder, I'm glad you said that about Cynthia and your family, because I do wonder, like, who are you talking to? Scott's feeding you information. Like, what is your process then for assessing that? Are you and Cynthia sort of like huddling? Are you talking to your mom? Like, what's going through your mind in terms of that decision making? Because as you say, this is a life altering from a money perspective, but even to your point, where you're going to live, who you're going to play for, what's the culture of the team you want to embrace. So what are those conversations behind the scenes like?
Yeah, let me bring you inside the tent because this is a very tight tent. And it was basically Cynthia, myself, and Scott. And part of prepping for 9 years is there's a gag order. So you go to an undisclosed location, you're basically in a mountain somewhere, and you're to make no phone calls, no family, no friends. You got to build a mystique and a mystery around what's happening. And you don't want anybody to be able to know what you're thinking or to be able to kind of connect dots because of, informal conversations you're having. So I was in a hole for 10 days. And I'll tell you, when it finally said, are you sitting down? I said, yeah, I'm sitting. No, I was actually standing. He said, you ready? He said, 10 years, $252 million. And I said, WTF, what? Are you kidding me? How is that possible? We were trying to get, 180, 200. And, the 10 years made it the big 252, which ironically, Jason, was double the amount of the largest contract in American history from Kevin Garnett from the Minnesota Timberwolves. He had 126.
Wow. The symmetry here is insane, like where your life has taken you from a sports perspective and elsewhere. So what was your feeling when you heard that? What goes through your mind?
I don't know if I was more excited at the time of the number or the fact that I get to fly home because I was homesick. I wanted to get home. So I was super excited. I felt a lot of pressure. I felt like the work starts today. Is not the end. This is the beginning. And I remember I flew home and I landed in Miami around 2 a.m. I remember putting on my clothes on the plane, my workout stuff, 2 o'clock in the morning. I drive to the University of Miami to the track right behind the baseball field, where if you hit a home run in the baseball field, over the left field wall, you hit the middle of the track. That's where I went. I jumped the fence and I started running and doing my sprints and my workouts about 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the morning. And that was my first workout getting ready for spring training, which was in a few months.
Wow. Unlike a lot of people, you got sort of a second bite at the apple because you sort of got to do it again. You do end up with the Yankees. And for those who missed it, I highly recommend going back to the episode we did with Derek Jeter, your teammate and fellow world champion back in 2009, talking about your deal to get there. There's a really funny story about you and Brian Cashman and having a few drinks. And obviously there's also some really interesting context about why you made the decision then. So take us back to that second go round, because you're a different player and maybe you have, I dare say, like some different priorities. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, there's no question. I mean, remember, from 15 to 24, when I was a free agent, I was like a robot that was trained for 9 years by Scott Boras. Now you fast forward to when I'm 32, I had different priorities. At that time, I had 2 baby girls. At that time, I valued the Yankees so much that I had 2 or 3 teams that had bigger offers than the Yankees, but I valued the Yankees a great deal. And I had the luxury, Jason, because at that point I had made a lot of money. So I was in a different position. Money didn't mean as much as it did as 24. A better way of saying it, at 24, I was more of a mercenary. At 32, I was more of a missionary. And the Yankees meant a great deal to me.
Right. And that, I mean, I think you would probably agree you made the right decision, right? I mean, you won
There's
the
no
World
question
Series with
about
the New
it.
York Yankees. I mean, that's
And my vision was I wanted more than anything to be in Monument Park. The romance of going to the Hall of Fame with a Yankee and the pinstripes was very appealing to me. And the other teams, while they were, good teams and they made better offers, I just thought the combination of spending 15 years as a New York Yankee meant a great deal to me.
So let's talk about, why do you think Soto made this decision?
I think you can't blame Juan Soto. Look, Juan comes from a very humble background in Dominican Republic. You work your absolute tail off. The average career of a major league player is 5.5 years. He's worked his butt off. So anyone who blames Juan Soto, they got to be crazy, because this is, lottery money, and he can take care of his family for generations to come. He did everything he asked for. He never misled anyone. He was very honest, very forthright, and was an absolute pro. And now he's not a player with Steve Cohen. He's a partner of Steve Cohen. And if you think about Cohen, he paid $2.45 for the Mets. This contract's going to take you north of $800 million. And remember, a guy like Steve Cohen has bigger ambitions than just the Mets. Does he want to build a soccer team, a soccer venue? Does he want to build a casino? Is he going to be part of, when SNY contract runs out, does he build his own Yes Network instead of SNY? So there's a lot there, and you have a guy like Soho to be your partner and run with you.
So let's talk about what this means for baseball. You said something interesting earlier about sort of the New York element of it. There's a little bit of little brother punching up, it feels like to me, being a sort of transplanted New Yorker, Stevie Cohen basically saying, I am not messing around here. I want to win, and I'm willing to, do whatever it takes to do that. We know from his success in the hedge fund world, like, he's going for it. But what does this do? Because I think it's fair to say, and I'm saying this is me, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, your contract fundamentally changed the business of baseball. I think that's fair to say. There were rules, the opt-out, sort of came in the wake of that. What will this contract do you think, for the business of baseball?
I think it's a tale of two stories, Jason. I mean, look, there's about 5 or 6 teams that are crushing it, the haves and have-nots, but the have-nots of the 30 teams are much bigger. And there's no coincidence that the 5 teams that were involved, the Yankees, the Mets, the Red Sox, the Dodgers, and the Blue Jays, all have a very, very healthy regional sports network deal. Toronto has a whole country, the Boston have NESN, the Mets have SNY, the Yankees have ES, and you have the sports net with the Dodgers that make well over $200 million a year. If you take a step back, baseball about 25 years ago made a macro bet that regional sports network is where the money is, where the NBA and NFL made a macro bet that the national TV deal, and NFL is $110 billion, NBA is at $77 billion. The national TV deal for the Mets is only $10 billion. The regional sports networks are having a lot of issues. So the teams that have the healthiest TV deals, if you think about the Yankees that make $200 plus a year for their TV deal, The Marlins are somewhere around 16 million. It's just not sustainable. So I think it's going to change the business again. You have a CBA that's coming up here in the next couple of years. I would watch that very carefully because there's some owners that are thrilled, like the Dodgers, the Mets, the Yankees, and there's some owners with the Pirates and, Marlins and others that are saying, how do we compete?
I feel like, again, this is just me sort of speculating a little bit. Your contract back in the day not only changed baseball, it made every other professional sport sort of take stock of what the compensation was for players. I would argue it didn't just change the negotiations in baseball, it changed the negotiations elsewhere. Does this have that effect too? Or are the sports sort of, and, obviously you're very involved, deeply involved in another major sport in the NBA and the WNBA. Do these sorts of contracts resonate across those sports too?
I think so. I mean, look, this is a copy and paste business, right? And when you look at Soto's contract at, let's say, $46 million a year, you still have a handful of NBA players that make more per year. You have a handful of quarterbacks that make more per year. What makes this such a daunting number is the 15 years, right?
Yeah.
Which you don't really have that in football and in the NBA. So that's one way of thinking about it. But I think the model that most people are going to follow is your Atlanta Braves. They have Alex Anthopoulos, the baseball executive there, who's brilliant. He came from Toronto. And he's made some really, really shrewd strategic bets, whether that's Acuna, who's playing at 20 cents of the dollar. He's brought in Olsen from Oakland, that he's been fantastic. You have Albies at 35 for 7. You made a great bet with Riley, your center fielder. I mean, across the board, if you look at the value creation versus what they're paying, the arbitrage is enormous. So it's going to have to come down to talent evaluation. And when you see a great talent like an Aaron Judge early, sign him up for as long as possible. Don't let him become a free agent.
And so does that inform, and now I'm asking you to put on your hat as a professional team owner of a couple of sports teams, how has your mindset changed? Not necessarily about this deal, but again, I'm sure, with all these feelings and memories flooding back, now you are literally on the other side of the table for a lot of these negotiations. And so how does it inform your playbook? How is your playbook different now as an owner? I know we talked about this on the show before than it was at the player. What are the things you're sensitive to or that you especially sort of take to heart now, being not the player, but management?
If you take a step back to 2000, I think it's important to remember, it's not so long ago, but sometimes we forget as sports fans, is when a team made an announcement, the ownership and management had like 90% of the power. The 10% of the players, they didn't have the vehicle like the social media, the X, the Instagram to be able to voice their opinion. I remember, Jason, when I signed that contract, I became public enemy number one. And I didn't have a way to fight back. It was like, an ambush of criticism. And I love how far we've come in this game where Ohtani and Soto are looked at like superheroes because they're everything that's right with the game, right? So I like that. The other part is players are no longer players. At least in the NBA and WNBA, they're partners. You're building a business with them. As we go, we all win together. And you lose together. So I think that's where it's been a paradigm shift in owner-player. No, we're partners now. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the partner point is an interesting one, and you said it at the top, that the way that Soto is viewing, the Cohens and vice versa. Even sort of the language that's been around this, with like suites and, all these different sort of elements, it does feel much more like, hey, we're in business together now versus I work for you and you're paying me, I don't want to use bad language, a lot of money. You're paying me a lot of money and I'm going to show up and play. It's more, we're building a business together.
What's interesting about that, Jason? I don't know if you've heard a lot of the noise around some of the things around the edges that made a big difference for Juan Soto. And some of them were the suite that he got for 15 years for his family. Juan Soto is very much of a family man. You talked about he had a couple incidents with security where they pushed out his family into the rain and they weren't allowed into a special place. At the end of the day, look, it was about the money. But what I would say is if you combine, 3 or 4 or 5 of these things around the edges, they start moving the needle a little bit. I don't think just one, but 2 or 3 or 4 of these. And look, the one thing Steve Cohen knows is he knows how to identify value. Yeah. And whether it's one of his hedge fund managers at P72 or if it's Juan Soto, he has no problem paying you the very most if you're the very best. And that's exactly what he did. And he's one of the greatest art collectors in the world. And for him, he was going to an auction, a Sotheby's auction, and he was going to walk away with the Mona Lisa or the Warhol that he wanted. And nobody was going to outbid him.
All right, so let me ask you this, point blank. You think he's worth it?
I do think he's worth it. Look what he did for the Yankees. If you look at the numbers for the Yankees, the S&Y numbers have not been better in probably 10 years. You had a full house at Yankee Stadium. There was an excitement. There was an energy. It reminds me, Jason, when Barry Bonds went from Pittsburgh to San Francisco. He basically didn't play one game at home that wasn't a sold-out crowd. And when you had the Jordans, the LeBrons, the Barry Bonds, guys like that can move the needle, they're more than just one player. They're really a paradigm shift for a whole franchise and the self-esteem of that franchise. And the Mets are saying, we're not your father's Mets. This is a new era, baby, and we're here to stay.
Yeah, it's interesting, too, and you mentioned this, and I want to sort of underline it. This whole notion of, like, what the Cohen family is building out around Citi Field. You know, as I mentioned, I'm in Atlanta, and last night I drove with a friend of mine past Truist Park. You see the Battery. You see all these developments. That is clearly the vision that Cohen has for around Citi Field. And there's a massive amount of ambition. And I guess this may be the crown jewel of it. It's amazing.
Well, I think that's a great example, Jason. I think Atlanta Braves have done as good a job as anyone. And that Battery area, we covered the World Series there for Fox a few years ago. And it was like a college atmosphere for, like, you know, college game day.
Yeah.
But everything starts on the field and it works out. If you have the greatest properties, if you have the greatest assets, if you're not winning and you don't have talent, you're dead duck. Now, what Alex Anthopoulos has done with the Braves is he's identified great talent. He has signed them up for many, many years at cents to the dollar, and it creates a continuity, an aura, and the Braves are also back. They may not win every year, but they're going to compete every single year with this core.
I love that we brought it back to the Braves. I appreciate that. All right, so usually you and I are together interviewing someone else and making them answer rapid-fire questions. I am using my position of mild authority here to turn the tables on you and ask you some rapid-fire questions. So same rules apply. First thing that jumps to mind, and I get to ask all of them this time.
I love it. I love it.
All right, so where do you think Juan Soto will hit in the lineup?
I think he would hit second again, and they got to go out and get a right-handed hitter to protect him.
What round do you think the Mets will make it to next year in the playoffs?
I think they'll compete for a title, and they'll make it to at least the championship series again.
All right, which team is best equipped to offer the next record-breaking deal?
I think the Dodgers. The Dodgers, you know, they run a team like an NFL team. Their P&L is unbelievable after Ohtani.
Okay, who's going to get the next record-breaking deal?
That's a tougher question, Jason, because I think owners are going to go to school on this, and they're not going to let young talent, supreme talent like Soto, ever become a free agent again. And you're seeing that trend. Now they're going to double down on it.
All right, so what advice, given everything we've talked about, you were in his shoes, now Soto is wearing those same cleats in a way, what's the advice you would give the next free agent who does try and negotiate a big deal?
Depending what the goal is, but follow exactly what Juan Soto did. That was perfectly done. It's a masterclass.
All right. Well, I am very appreciative of you. I missed you over the last few weeks because we haven't been recording, and we agreed on text. If we're not talking about this deal, we're not doing our jobs. I think you said it would be malpractice if we didn't do something on the deal. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, keep track of everything we've done. Stay tuned for everything that's coming up on the deal. My thanks to my partner, Alex Rodriguez, for jumping on. It was really good to see you, my man.
Well, if I don't see you, have a happy holiday, and I miss you too, pal.
The Deal is hosted by Alex Rodriguez and me, Jason Kelly. This episode was made by Stacey Wong, Anna Mazarakis, and Lizzie Phillip. Our theme music was made by Blake Maples. Our executive producers are Kelly LaFerriere, Ashley Honig, and Brendan Newnham. Sage Bauman is the head of Bloomberg Podcasts. Additional support from Rachel Scaramazino and Elena Sausangelis. Thanks for listening to The Deal. If you have a minute, please subscribe, rate, and review our show.
It'll help other listeners find us. And remember, if you're a Bloomberg subscriber, you can listen to all of our episodes absolutely ad-free on Apple Podcasts. All you need to do is find the Bloomberg channel and connect your Bloomberg account. I'm Jason Kelly.
We'll see you next time on The Deal.